we might have been wrong about Charlotte Emily this entire time. We're going to delve a little bit into FNAF 2 movie spoilers, but it's not about the movie. But it is kind of movie spoilers, so you have been warned. But honestly, you can probably watch this video before watching the movie, and the movie won't be any worse because of it. But the movie did introduce some lore that, if is true for the games, might shake up the entire timeline of Five Nights at Freddy's as we know it. Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. So what lore from the movie do I think is relevant to bring into the game's timeline? Well, in the movie, it's revealed that the only person who ever died at the FNAF 2 location was Charlotte Emily at the hands of William Afton, and she goes on to possess the marionette. The reason the other animatronics at the location are aggressive, though, is that the marionette was created to be able to wirelessly control all other animatronics in the building. The puppet would puppet the other machines around the FNAF 2 location, and because Charlotte possessed the puppet, she's able to do this with all of the toys and Withered animatronics at the FNAF 2 location. Part of that reveal is that the Withered animatronics are not the original FNAF 1 animatronics. They are completely separate robots. They were in fact prototypes for this location specifically, but were scrapped and instead the toys were made. So that's the lore of the movie, that snippet, that Charlotte is the only ghost at this location and she's controlling all of them. Is that applicable to the games? So how can we tell if lore from something outside of the game continuity can be used within the game continuity? There's no one right way to tell, to be honest. It really depends on your personal preferences and what you think is relevant. For myself, I've already developed a system for the books that I have been applying to the movies. That is, lore from outside the continuity can be brought in so long as it satisfies two criteria. 1. Does it directly contradict with any confirmed or nearly confirmed information from the games? And 2. Does it make logical sense to fit within the game timeline? So that sounds pretty straightforward, but how does this work in practice? To better explain my process, we'll go through 3 different combinations before talking about the main point. One where neither criteria are met, one of each of but criteria are met, and then we'll talk about if the criteria is met for my point. First point, FNAF 2 opened in 1982. Does it directly contradict any information we have? Well, yes, actually. At the beginning of the game, there's a newspaper ad to start working at the FNAF 2 location, describing it as if it's open with a $100.50 a week price on it. At the end of the game, we get a check dated for 1987 with that same price. Not only that, but the newspaper snippet we get at the end of the game says that the location was only open for a few short weeks. You put all this together, the location was only open within the year of 1987, directly going against this information from the movie. So that's 1 point no, and as far as logical sense go, this still doesn't really work with the game's timeline. Over and over again, the games emphasize that Freddy's as a brand was established in 1983. The only restaurant open before then was Fredbear's Family Diner. And even if you wanted to try to make the argument that the FNAF 2 location was open in 83, we have strong indication that Fredbear's Family Diner was also open at that time, and Phone Guide talks about that location as if it's a long forgotten relic, not something that's currently open. So both points are no, and because of that, I think that this lore detail is definitely not within the game's continuity. Our next point, the FNAF 2 gameplay happened long after our restaurant closed. Does it directly contradict anything from the games? All the evidence we have suggests that whoever is working there while the restaurant is active. Not only do we have the check evidence from before, but the toy animatronics in the newspaper ad were said to be scrapped after the restaurant closed. But they're in the game and they're clean, pristine, and perfectly working. So I think clearly we are working there while it is still open. But it does make logical sense. The idea that Michael Afton got a job at the FNAF 2 location long after it closed just to get clues for his father's whereabouts does make perfectly logical sense in our timeline. So that point is a yes. However, one no and one yes, I still think this movie detail is unlikely, even if you swap where the yes and no are. Like for our next point, Henry was trying to get the truth about the Freddy's murders out into the public by any means necessary. Does this directly contradict any information we have? Well, no, because we have like zero information on what Henry was doing before FNAF 6. He is a big mystery and enigma from the beginning of the timeline to FNAF 6. No clue what he does there. So it doesn't directly contradict anything, but does it make logical sense? I would argue no. Everything we do know about Henry points to him being a guilty recluse who feels just as guilty about the murders as the murderer himself. So being the guy who puts up flyers that say, "Call me and I'll tell you everything about the horrible events," it doesn't really make sense for his character in the games. So even though it doesn't directly contradict anything, because it's not logical, I think this point also can't carry over from the movie. So then, with this system in mind, what about the fact that Charlotte Emily, while possessing the marionette, has wireless control of all of the toy and withered animatronics in the FNAF 2 location, and that she is the only death from that location that resulted in a possession? Well, point 1. Does this directly contradict any information within the games? It turns out that information about the marionette is actually very sparse. The only direct quotes about it from the game are that the music box calms it down, and the phone guy doesn't like it because, quote, it's always thinking. But that's it. We know from FNAF 6 that at one point the marionette was used for security and would track people's wristbands, but again, that's it. Now, at the same time, if at the time of FNAF 2, it was planned that the marionette controlled all the animatronics, I'm almost certain that Scott would have mentioned it somewhere in Phone Guy's dialogue or on a poster or something, and it's not. So I don't think at the time it was planned to be that way, to be honest. But it's been 10 years since the game came out, and they're trying to make a working story here. And the fact is that we have no direct information on the purpose of the marionette. So the purpose of the marionette being to control all the animatronics does not directly contradict any information we have on it. So that's one point to yes. Our next point is for the logical sense. Does it logically make sense for the marionette to be able to control all the FNAF 2 animatronics? And there's actually a surprising amount of circumstantial evidence and groundwork for this theory to be true. Like I mentioned, Phone Guy brings up that it's always thinking, which could lean into that, but looking throughout the whole timeline, the puppet / Charlotte Emily is always brought up in contexts about controlling other animatronics. In the FNAF 2 minigame Save Them, the marionette is literally leading Withered Freddy to try to stop William Afton, controlling an animatronic. In Ultimate Custom Night, she has several lines that lean into this, I think the most pertinent being, "The others are like animals, but I am very aware." And you could even argue that in FNAF 3, the Happiest Day minigame is Charlotte doing this over and over again. The one time we control an individual spirit is the puppet, or Charlotte. But any other time we're playing a minigame, we're controlling an animatronic, and more often than not, frankly in everything but Stage 01, we are specifically controlling a toy animatronic. So it is perfectly logical for the marionette to be able to puppet around the toy and withered animatronics. Alright, so using my personal, somewhat arbitrary method of deciding what lore is and isn't able to be carried over into the game's continuity, this is likely to be part of the main game timeline. That's all well and good, but I wouldn't have done this if there was no point. What is the point? What does this change about what we know about FNAF 2 and the grander timeline? So let's start with FNAF 2. If Charlotte Emily is able to individually control all the other animatronics, and she's the only active ghost in the building, what does this change about FNAF 2? Well, one of the biggest debates is what exactly in this game is possessed. There's Golden Freddy, he's there, he's weird, and we know from FNAF 6 that Charlotte Emily is almost definitively the one possessing the marionette. But the Withereds and the toys are always a weird spot in this debate. Many of us believe that the Withereds are still possessed from the remnant of the MCI, if they're the same animatronics from the original Freddy's location, which they aren't. I'd also argued that the toys weren't possessed by the DCI, but instead possessed by parts of the MCI. So, breaking this down, the MCI is the missing child incident that happened at the first Freddy's location. That's what causes the original suits to get possessed. The DCI is a non-canon name for the murders that happened at the FNAF 2 location, because in Save Them, there are dead bodies all throughout the building. The problem is, the game implies that the DCI happens at the end of the week, but by day 1, the toys are aggravated and trying to kill you. So are the toys possessed? I've in the past argued that the remnant from the MCI leaks over to the toys because the Withereds are used as spare parts. But as we've established, if this lore is accurate to the games, the Withereds aren't the same animatronics. There's no remnant here, so why are we being attacked? Well, we don't need any of this convoluted guesswork anymore. If the marionette is able to remotely control the toy and withered animatronics in FNAF 2, it's a way easier explanation for what's going on. Charlotte Emily is pissed and wants to kill any adult who she doesn't like, and right now that's us. She can't do it herself because we keep the music box wound, so using the marionette, she's puppeting as many other animatronics as she can to get into our room. This even goes to explain why they all behave the same exact way. One of the shittier things about the FNAF 2 gameplay is that no matter what, all you have to do is put on a mask if there's an animatronic in your room, for like 90% of the cast. They enter the room, you put on a mask, they leave. That's boring for gameplay, but in this explanation, it makes perfect sense. All that's going on is Charlotte is directing animatronic robots to go and attack you, but when they see the mask, their programming tells them to walk away. She's literally trying to have them fight against their own programming. And this continues to all the other lore. How in Save Them, she's leading Withered Freddy. Now instead of trying to convince Gabriel to come help, she's just directing Withered Freddy to go attack William Afton. So that's one thing. FNAF 2 is way more straightforward now. But does this affect the grander timeline in any way? Well, only a few things, because admittedly, FNAF 2 is fairly self-contained. The DCI has always been a weird spot in the lore, because we need some sort of reason for William Afton to just kill kids and leave them out and about. In the past, I've chalked up the DCI to William Afton trying to get a rise out of the animatronics who he thinks are possessed. But if these withered animatronics are different from the originals, then he wouldn't be trying to get a rise out of them at all. However, the motive can still mostly make sense here. If in the original Freddy's location he does the MCI to try to make animatronics become possessed and it doesn't work, the DCI could just be attempt number 2. Okay, stuffing them in the suit didn't work, let me kill them and leave them nearby the suit. Maybe that'll work. But the result of the DCI is still the same, because when he does this, he sees the marionette leading Withered Freddy to try to take him down, and he knows that Charlotte Emily has possessed the marionette, and possession is possible. As far as other points in the timeline, this does shoot down my initial Funtime MCI theory, because I had been saying that the remnant from the Withereds leaks over to the toys, and then when FNAF 2 closes, they scrap the toys, William scoops them up, melts them down, and turns them into remnant for the Funtime animatronics in the bunker. That doesn't super work anymore because no MCI remnant is here, but that is a pretty easy fix. Follow Me now becomes the most likely explanation, when he systematically goes to the FNAF 1 location after it closes down, takes them apart one by one, and melts down their remnant for the fun times. So, not only does this explanation make FNAF 2's lore way more straightforward and congestible, but it easily fits into a lot of timelines. It doesn't mess up Molten MCI, which many people and myself believe in, and it doesn't affect much else outside of it. So honestly, I don't see a good reason to assume this isn't true, but let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. In the meantime, if you want an inclusive games shakeup, last week I talked about how Edwin Murray might be the one to have invented illusion discs, which is as crazy as it sounds, but you can find the video right here. If you want your fan art featured on the channel, make sure to share it with #ToastArt. A huge thank you to the best channel members, the Dough Risers, and until next time, as always, stay toasty, slices.